Well, hello and greetings, Sam.
Wow.
Sam Collier, thank you so much for joining all the way from Los Angeles, where you are visiting, or your home is Atlanta.
Yeah.
Sam Collier is a friend, and that's really an important part. We love to be with each other, we tease each other, make jokes. But he's also a well-known writer, an influencer, a social activist, a radio host, a pastor, a podcast generator, written a wonderful book, A Greater Story, which you can flash if you've got, guys. It's well worth getting. Greater Story. So, Sam, first question, of all these things that I've read, which is the one, which hat do you most enjoy? An influencer, radio host, pastor?
I think the one I enjoyed the most is being Ken's friend. When you said that, I'm just honored to be here, man. Again, listen, so excited. You can't get anything done in London or the UK without Ken Costa. It does not happen. And so I'm excited to be with the man that has the plan and
We're never
all of that.
we're never going to get anywhere in this in the interview, but it's very nice of you to say all of that.
We're never gonna get anywhere, right?
So,
But no, I think the thing, the area that I probably get the most fulfillment from is some form of speaking in some type of way. When I'm speaking live, that's why, even I know we're all in the midst of the pandemic. In some way, I miss being on the stage, but we're starting to creep our way back out of the house a little bit here in the States. That's why we're in LA now, trying to do all we can to push this book and speaking at different churches. Just started a church tour. And so we're meeting with the mask and you're doing all you can. And so it's something about that audience, one-on-one, kind of back and forth, that gives me a little bit of life. And helping people become everything that God's created them to be. And so
you've got a great gift at this connecting. So tell us, seeing that we've come on to that topic right away, what is the church going to look like after this pandemic? Because you're energized by speaking. People want to be in churches, they want to meet, but we can't do that. We're under restrictions here. That you are as well. What do you think? Because you've traveled around, what do you think the church begins to look like coming through it? Will it be the same as when we went into it?
Wow. Yeah. I don't think it'll ever be the same again. I've been traveling, and people have been asking me, what's my message kind of during this pandemic? And it's interesting because I try to spend a lot of time before we get to any principles on the idea of letting go of yesterday. I think for so many of us, we want to go back to what was. We keep waiting. Everybody, when is it going to get back to normal, right? I mean, that's when is it going to get back? And it'll never get back. I mean, what it was, it won't be. But there will be a new norm in a sense, but it won't be what it was. And so I think when I think about the new norm, and what I'm seeing, what's interesting is as I've gone to churches that are starting to meet again, in a sense, the rooms are full. And when I say full, I mean they're half full, with people with their mask on, trying not to touch each other, but enjoying the live experience while going online. I think we'll never not be online again.
That's
I think
change.
What'd you say?
Permanent change.
Online. Yeah, permanent change. John Tyson, who's out of New York, I don't know if you know him. John is an incredible thinker, and he often talked about, this idea of warring with online, that he was a really big in-person experience kind of guy. And so when the pandemic hit, it flipped everything on its head. He said he really just underestimated online. He said he'll never underestimate it again. And so I think that's one of the ways that it will be. I mean, it will always be an online and offline experience.
It's so interesting you say that, because if you look at the commercial world, financial world, what we're saying is that the trends that were in place before the COVID crisis have accelerated massively. You only have to read Amazon and the stock price. We've just done that. And in a sense, there was the beginnings of an online engagement before lockdown. But now the question is going to be, when we come through this, it will always be there. But which is going to be the top dog? Is it going to be virtual, or is it going to be physical?
Well, I think we were headed towards a virtual world anyway. And I think virtual will always lead the way. We know Amazon, right? The big fish in town, right? They're just, they come in and stores just start shutting down left and right. So I think virtual, in my opinion, I think virtual will always lead the way. People are selling, in a sense, convenience, right, from the phone, being able to pick it up. That's why they talk about the phenomenon of Uber, that it was really the selling of convenience that people are buying into, as opposed to just kind of the car stand. So I think online and convenience will lead the way. However, what's interesting is that as I talk to people during this season, as I talk to people during this time, community, in a sense, has become sacred again.
Yes.
So it's like, while it was, oh, I'll see you. Now it's, hey, I have to see you. I have to come over. I have to get out of this house.
I go mad if I don't.
Right.
So your first point was, let go of the past. What do you grab hold of now? What do you think God is doing in the world, in the UK, the US, or where you travel? What are you holding on to now? Letting go, understand. Grabbing hold of, forgetting what lies behind. There's a good verse. Philippians 3.
Come on, kid. Yeah, I'm letting go of what was, and I'm trying to embrace what is. Letting go of what was, embracing what is. I think for me, there's a message in this season that I've been preaching. It's the same message, because I find that, people are losing people left and right. There's so many deaths from COVID, especially here in the States. I think we may be leading the way in the world potentially right now. And so many people are losing things. People are losing jobs. And, it's really difficult, as, Simon Sinek has been talking a lot about this idea of pivoting, that in this season, we have to pivot. And I think pivoting is strongly and closely related to the idea of embracing what is now. If I'm going to let go of what was and embrace what is, that means I'm going to have to pivot. And here's the deal. And this is what I tell people. It's like, we've gone through change before, because yes, this is a pandemic, but at the core, this is change. It's just another change. It's a change of the way of doing life, a way of connecting with others, reimagining church, reimagining business, reimagining the economy. And it's just change. And what's constant is change. And we've been through change before. The question is can we pivot with the change? And we're going to go through another change, right? I mean, we're going to come out of this pandemic, in a sense, and we're going to change again. And then 10 years from now, we're going to change. In 5 years. We just don't change as quickly as we have been having to change over the last couple of years, and especially in this year, but we're going to change. And my message to people in this season is to try to help them embrace change. And I always say, with change, there's two things that comes. There's challenge, and then there's opportunity. Sure. Whenever there's change, there's always a challenge and there's opportunity. And you have to manage your challenge. But if you're not careful, many of us will spend so much time managing our challenges that we miss the unique opportunities. You talked about the idea of Amazon and Netflix and Disney Plus. Yeah. One of the things that is true, and whether we like it or not, and I don't want to sound crass when I say this, is that I lost my uncle, my aunt, my biological father, who I only met, I've never met. I've talked to him twice. I lost all three of them in 3 weeks during COVID-19. At the beginning, maybe about a month in, back to back. I was preaching the funeral on Zoom for my uncle. And as sad as that is, That's a challenge. The Zoom stock and Amazon stock was was out of this world.
I know. Well, let's hope that the church's stock and that of the message and the preachers also rises in that same exponential way. And
Yes.
what do you sense the Spirit of God is saying to you as you're speaking, or to people that you're meeting in the midst of this challenge and opportunity, and how to balance both?
Ken, come on, you going in, Ken, you going in. I would say, a scripture that has been very, very prophetic for me in this season, and also very grounding, that I've tried to use with most people as I've been navigating and trying to, in a sense, help lead anyone through this time, is the idea of Jesus on the boat. And Jesus is in the boat, and he's with the disciples, and we know the story. He's asleep.
Yeah.
The storm breaks out.
Yeah.
And Jesus is asleep. And that is a huge parallel to where we are now. We're living at a time where a storm has broken out.
Sure has.
And we're looking around we're asking the question the disciples asked, Jesus, where are you? Wake up, right? Like, are you help? They're panicking. Help us. And what's interesting in the story to me is Jesus's response to them after he wakes up. It isn't, are you okay?
Yeah.
It isn't, he's not encouraging them. He says, oh, ye of little faith. That's his response in the midst of the storm.
Yes.
Oh, ye of little faith. There's no comfort. There's no this. He's not preaching. Oh, ye of little faith. In other words, where's your faith? And I think for me, what I hear the Spirit of the Lord saying to the church is, where's our faith?
I think that's so good. Yeah, because it's faith. It's faith in Jesus at the moment that is most challenged by almost everyone that I would speak to. These are tough times.
Yeah.
But Sam, tell me a bit more about you. Life hasn't always been treating you as well as the website tells, that you're in great demand, that you're speaking, you're on podcasts and meeting people. There've been tough times in your life. How have you navigated the setbacks?
Yeah, I think that's a great segue out of the idea of having an anchor. That I think the Spirit in this season is asking us about our anchor and where we put our hope, and if we can be easily shaken by the changes of life. And I think for me, I was always challenged with that question of where I was gonna put my faith, what I was going to anchor to, because life around me was rocky a lot of times. We talk about this idea of this book and all of that, and the book is rooted in my story around Auburn Avenue, but it started in extreme poverty.
Auburn Avenue meaning, what is Auburn Avenue?
Auburn Avenue is the birthplace of civil rights here in Atlanta. It's the same street that Martin Luther King Jr. grew up on. It's where, if you walk on Auburn now, the government, in a sense, has kind of taken over, and they've taken the houses and the birth home, and the Martin Luther King Jr. Center is there. And then across the street is the Martin Luther King Jr. National Park.
You grew up there?
I grew up on Auburn Avenue, and I got to Auburn because my parents adopted me. I was adopted. I know I spoke a little bit earlier about not knowing my biological father, but speaking to him twice in my life before we lost him in COVID-19 a couple months ago. I got adopted at 2 months out of extreme poverty. Our mother was 21 when she had us, me and my twin sister. She had 3 kids already. That's 5 kids, age 21, in extreme poverty. If you look at the adoption papers, it says that they traced a lot of her steps back to a prostitution house. Don't know if she was prostituting or if she was living there. Dad, again, was not in the picture, what I left out of his story was that he had a really big war, if you will, with addiction in his life. And what's interesting is that when we lost him 3 months ago from COVID, we lost him because he had diabetes in the hospital in New York City when New York was the hotbed here in the States. And he got up and left the hospital to walk down the street in the middle of the pandemic to get drugs, and contracted COVID-19 on the street, went back to the hospital and passed away. And I tell you that part of the story, but to let you know how long substance abuse was a part of his life. And so he was knee deep in that when me and my sister was born, left my mother, she's here in the hospital, having to make a decision of whether she's going to raise us in, poverty or give us up for adoption. And long story short, we get adopted by a couple who was living in Atlanta on Auburn, and back and forth between there and Decatur. And so had to navigate a lot.
That's extraordinary. But I was deeply moved. I'm afraid I don't know that one couldn't be when you were interviewed, because you discovered literally your biological mother in very unusual terms on the Steve Harvey show. It's so captivating just to think of you now. I mean, people often think, here is a very successful person, and actually, life, oh, well, they just got there. But you've struggled through it, and to discover your own mother on a live television show, as I remember it, must have been extraordinary. I can just remember you with your head down like that. So tell us a bit of the story there.
Of course. Wow, Ken. Yeah, life-changing experience. Life-changing experience. We talk about the idea of this anchor and, God always being there. And I think, the best and the worst question that you can ask God is, use me. Because when take over, right? Lead me. When he does it, it ultimately takes you to your best life. It takes you to the miraculous, but it also gives your life into his hands, and he does whatever he wants to do when he wants to do it, and you're just holding on to the ride. And so that's the preamble to how we got to the Steve Harvey show. Because again, so my mother's 21, she gives us up, and when my parents come to adopt us, they had just given their life to Christ. And my adoptive dad, he was 50 something when he adopted us. So this is he's 84 now. So it's kind of the last season of his life. And my mother, she was a little, maybe about 10 to 11 years younger, but she had been in an abusive marriage before she met my father. And so they met, gave their life to Christ because they said, look, we've done it our way long enough. And so God leads them down to adopt because my mother couldn't have kids. So when they come to adopt us, and I'm going to speed through this story to get to Steve Harvey, when they come to adopt us, the woman who's, I guess, running the adoption agency runs over to them, and she says, you don't want to adopt them because where they come from, they're probably not going to be much. Addiction and this and that. In fact, this is what she said, in fact, they'll probably be mentally challenged. And well, you might think I'm mentally challenged already again, but
you're doing all right for the moment.
Right.
We'll have to ask Toni the question whether she thinks.
We'll have to ask. But they pray. You talk about the Spirit of the Lord, and the Spirit of the Lord says, no, they're going to be all right. They're not going to be mentally challenged. They're going to be fine. And so they take us home and raise us. And long story short, Ken, my sister gets all A's from kindergarten up to 12th grade. Dual scholarship to Spelman and Georgia Tech, becomes an industrial engineer. And, I'm with Ken Costa, right? I'm with the man that runs London, right? And books and movie, not movies, but, and all these other things that I'm doing. And a couple years go by after my sister kind of becomes this person, and I'm going to do the things I'm doing in ministry. And my father, around age 24, we're on the couch doing a little bit of a tradition that we have here in the States. It's family by family, but it's called NFL football. I don't know. No. I know footballers, y'all refer to it.
We've seen the pictures. They even have it here in the old days, packing out stadiums, but we have good rugby.
Right. I get it. I get it. And look, you got to be tough to play rugby. Baby. So y'all might be tougher than us when it comes to the sports. And so but here, you know, NFL football. So there's a team called the Atlanta Falcons,
Yes.
which is the NFL team in Atlanta. And we're watching the Falcons. And my dad said, there's one rule. Nobody talks during the game. And so he breaks the rule in the middle of the, of the game, and he starts yelling at us. Now, yelling for him was normal because he was from the country, and not everybody from the country in the South, and you've seen the movies, but not everybody from the country in the South is loud, but he was that loud, typical. So yelling for him was his normal volume. And he starts yelling at me and my twin sister, "You need to go find your biological family." And we're like, what are you, why? He said, "Well, you could grow up one day and marry your cousin and you would never know it." And I said, what do you lost your mind? And then he said, "And Steve Harvey is going to help you do it." And I said, I got up and I left because I said he lost his mind. I found out a couple of days later that he said that the Lord told him while he was watching the Steve Harvey show down in the barbershop on Auburn Avenue that he had where we grew up. God told him that Steve Harvey was going to help us find our biological.
And who's Steve Harvey for the English audience?
So Steve Harvey is a world-class comedian, entrepreneur, media mogul. Long story short, very simply put, extremely famous.
Yeah.
I can't get the is not Colbert isn't from there. James Hart is his name. James Corden, who's here, I think.
Yeah.
Very similar to him, but bigger. In the States.
Prime time television.
Oh man, just if he walked down the street, he's getting mobbed. It's crazy. And so to think about it, Oprah is probably a great comparison to him. Yeah, Oprah, Ellen, they all kind of are in that same thing. So for my dad to say that the Lord told him, right? We talk about this idea of the prophetic. And I know me and you haven't spoken much about that, but we play in those areas. My dad gets this word from the Lord, and I thought he lost his mind because you're like, that's not happening. And so he convinces my sister to write into the Steve Harvey show 2 weeks after this. And she writes in because she's like, then nobody's going to write us back. I'll just get him to shut up, right? Like let me just write in. And so a year goes by. My phone rings, and it's my sister, and I answered the phone. And she said, the Steve Harvey show just called me. They're going to call you by, and hung up the phone.
Wow.
And I said, and then my phone rings again another 2 minutes. It's a Chicago number. I answer it. And it says, hey, this is Dorothy from the Steve Harvey show. This is my first week on the job. I used to work at Jerry Springer. And I was like, what? I don't know if you know about Jerry Springer, but it was just crazy show. And she says, well, because it's the first week on my job, they put 100 stories on my desk. Yours was the top story. We think we can help you find your biological family. Do you want to do it? Wow. I said, let me call you back, Dorothy. I called my sister. I said, Sarah, do you want to do it? She says, no, but I feel like we have to do this because this doesn't just happen. And so they fly me and my sister and my adoptive parents up to Chicago, where Steve had now taken over the Oprah kind of setting, and where he's filming his show. And Dorothy says, when we get there, we haven't found anybody, but we want to bring you on the show to maybe make a plea. We're so sorry. We hired a private detective, but they couldn't find anybody. And so we go on the show, we go to commercial break. We come back after commercial break, and Steve Harvey says, hey, I know I said that we didn't find anybody, but that's not the case. Your biological mother is here. Eleanor, come on out.
Gosh. In the moment.
In the moment. On national television, music is playing, and our biological mother walks out.
I mean, I don't know how you would react to that. That's an incredible story. But it is also an extraordinary story of how, God acts, gives you words to encourage you. You wanted to find her,
Yeah.
you found her, and found her in those unusual circumstances. Well, that's an amazing story, because we often don't remember that some of our lives are messy. The
Yeah.
world's a messy place, and it's a difficult place at the moment. Hard decisions having to be made.
Yeah.
They tell that's such an amazing story. I don't even want to move on from it, but I do really want to ask you, what's going on in America? Now, I'm not asking a political, well, I don't know whether you can ever divorce it, but I'm not asking you to determine between Republicans and Democrats, but just the whole issue that has infected the world on race. And of course, I went on the march here with Black Lives Matter, slightly conflicted in my mind as to, I didn't really fully subscribe to some of the basic tenets,
Ideologies.
ideologies that they have. But nonetheless, I thought it was an important issue, given that I was born in South Africa. And the last time I was demonstrating against the racial oppression was 50 years ago, when I was a student and leading the demonstrations there.
Of course.
And 50 years later, I asked myself the question: has anything really changed? Now, I know it's different. In South Africa, we were fighting against illegal laws that were draconian and barbaric and unjust.
Yeah.
We saw them amazingly change, etc. But now it's cultural and personal, and you're trying to change behavior. It's very much more difficult. I think progress has been made, but nonetheless, it just appeared that what was happening in the US was we were becoming sensitized to that as well. And I just wondered, from your position, looking at it, in a unique way, I can't. Help us understand why it's taken hold so strongly in America, and what we can learn from it when we look to working together to see racial harmony come back into the main fiber of society.
Wow, what a question. Excited to have this conversation. I've been really good friends with the daughter of Martin Luther King Jr. for a long time.
Okay.
And we do Christmas together. We do Thanksgiving together. We were supposed to be in London in May together with leadership conference and with Alpha and all of that. And she was, we were working that out. And I know you were a large part of Alpha International for such a long time. You do so much. And so it was going to be exciting. And we were getting her and Nikki Gumbo together. And I'm sure if she was there, we were going to be at your house. I mean, it was it is what it is. You can't come through London and not stop by Ken's house. But with that being said, being friends with the daughter of Martin Luther King Jr. and working a lot of times in predominantly white spaces, in the church specifically, mega churches and all of that, my perspective, and growing up Black on Auburn, my perspective around race is a very unique one. And it's unique because I have friends on, lack of a better phrase, on both sides, right? I've got Republican friends, I've got Democratic friends, I've got white friends, Black friends, Asian friends, Hispanic, and the alike, wealthy, unwealthy. And then obviously growing up where I grew up. So my perspective on this conversation is interesting. I can be in a conversation with a Republican, a white Republican extremist, in a sense, that doesn't necessarily understand everything, and then turn around and be in a conversation with the daughter of Martin Luther King Jr. And so you develop an interesting perspective.
Your gifting and your calling, sir.
What'd you say?
That's your gifting and your calling.
Wow. See,
Not
don't
easy to be able to do that.
Don't start prophesying to me, kid, on the show, because it'll you turn that thing on. We won't get through. We'll never get done with this.
I'll stop any prophesying.
Okay. Because when you go, and people out there don't know, Ken Costa's got a prophetic gift, and his spiritual gift. They're activated at a high level. People don't know. I'll keep going. All right. So
get back to your script.
Okay. With that being said, you talked about Black Lives Matter, and I want to go ahead and put a caveat there, because what was a hashtag turned into a global movement, and within that, there were moments where we looked up and there was an organization and they had policies and nobody really knew what the policies were. And we were like, whoa, what's going on? Like, so, I mean, this was, as a Black man in America who supports the hashtag and the idea of Black Lives Matter, I didn't even know. I was on the site going, okay, wait, what is this? It's like, and so, very clearly we have to I don't want to use the word disassociate, but differentiate between the idea of supporting the phrase, but not necessarily lining up with the organization and the principle. Because honestly, we don't even know what they really are. Just to be honest. And so, the reason I bring that up is to say that the hashtag and the statement sparked something that was in the inside, that was on the inside of people at a very high level, not just in the States, but around the world. We looked up and we saw marches happening, obviously, in Atlanta and in New York and everywhere in America. And then I looked up and they were in London. And then I looked up and they were in South Africa. And then I looked up and it was in Australia, all happening at one time. And I call it the season of the double pandemics, to where you have COVID-19 and the liberation of Black and brown people around the world. And so I think, the Spirit of the Lord began to speak to me in that season, in the last couple of months, when everything was going crazy, and saying, and I believe that He showed me a prophetic vision. He was lifting up the hood of America and cleaning out the cobwebs.
Oh, wow.
That there were some things left over that we never finished. The job was started in the 60s and the 70s, and obviously slavery way before then, and the abolishment of slavery. And then we moved into Jim Crow, and then we moved into, civil rights, all these other things, the passing of laws, the assassination of Dr. King, that led us to where we are now. And so obviously, yes, progress in a sense has been made, but we have not, we didn't finish the job.
So where does, if we didn't finish the job, where does the church fit into the finishing of that of the job?
Yeah.
Does it take to get on to the movement, or?
Yeah, I think that what's so difficult about the problem we face today, which is why I think we have a lot of the tension at a high level, is that the racism isn't, in a sense, overt right now. Like in the 60s and in the 70s, it was very easy to see. There were, the white only fountains and this and the, okay, we're getting beat. And we're like, that was the Ku Klux Klan. It was very easy to see.
Yes.
The issue now is that we're living in the residue of the systems and the things that were put in place from slavery up to now. And so it's very subtle. And so it's not as overt. And so to do it, you really have to spend a lot of time educating people on the systems that were left in place, because it seems as if from the 70s or the 60s, 70s up to now, there's been a block in history that we both were being told different things. So now you have a white generation, and a lot of them are my friends. Yeah. You have a white generation that has never been exposed to the underbelly of America, to the actual history of Black and brown people here, and the systems that were put in place that are still even living today, haven't even been exposed to it. I'm talking about pastors that are leading some of the largest churches, just never been exposed to it. and you have a generation of Black and brown people that's all that they know, and they think that white people have been exposed to it at the highest level. And so what happens is these narratives begin to form on both sides, where you have, and I'm gonna get to the church's role. I'm unpacking it in a certain. Okay, and so the narratives, these unique narratives begin to form, and on the white side, and if we just talk to, well, let's just go white and Black. They're going, why are y'all, why are we still stuck on the past? Why are we still stuck here? They were like, this is over, this is over, this is over. Yeah. But it's because they've never been exposed. And on the Black side, the narrative becomes, why are you not fighting for me? Why do you not care? And you don't care is the thought. But the reality is that for Black Americans, and this is the part that has been encouraging for me, and this is where the church comes in, Black Americans, I think for the first time in the last couple of months said, oh, it's not that you know and don't care, it's that you don't know. And then white Americans, for the most part, have said, I think there's more to the story and some things that I didn't know that I thought I did.
But when you say about the story, do you mean the historical story or just the predicament of actual being a Black person living in the area they're living with underfunding and a marginalized class and all of that? Is that which is the bit that people don't get that you think we need to address now?
Yeah, it's it actually it is both, honestly. And what is leading the way, obviously, I think, is the education of these are the systems now. But what happens is when you start to educate our white brothers and sisters that go, hey, help me on what's happening now, you always have to walk back to what happened to lead us up to now. And so it's both and, because my white brothers and sisters are smart, they're going, okay, well, how did this happen? I'm going, well, we have to start here.
How do you get this? I'm just trying to think of, obviously this has had a huge effect here as well, and we're addressing the issue, which is great. How, in a practical way, sense, what do you think that the churches can do, recognizing, of course, we're in a strange COVID situation, but it may be that this is the very moment that we are able to reach more with a narrative or a change of narrative or an educated way. What do you think, what role can the churches do to create an authentically kingdom expression of what must be so obviously true of the New Testament?
Yeah, you talk about the New Testament. I love the story of the Good Samaritan, because the Good Samaritan gives us a very practical approach to coming together, because that's what we have to do. I think the church has to begin to bring us together. And we know the story of the Samaritan and the Jew, and the Samaritan reaches over and he bandages his wounds, so on and so forth. What's amazing about the story, though, is that Samaritan and Jews didn't get along. In other words, their relationship was uncommon. But he reaches across the line and he picks him up. He puts down his historical beliefs and what his culture would have done, and he loves, in a sense, his neighbor. Jesus says, who was a man to the neighbor in the story, the priest or the Levite, or was it obviously the Samaritan? It was the Samaritan. I think what the church has to do now on a very practical level is create unique environments for uncommon relationships to form.
Well, now let's say that again. Unique setups for uncommon relationships.
For uncommon relationships to form.
And at the base, at the ordinary level.
At the ordinary level. Yes.
Committee on diversity or whatever.
Which I think you need all of those. You need all of those. But we need laws to change. We need this to change. We need economic reform. We need police, all that, whatever. But if you do all of that without the foundation of relationship, we'll just be back in the same place that we are. Because
I totally agree. I really agree with that, because I think that at its base level is where the engagement will come from. Yes, you need the air cover, but
of course,
at the base of it.
That's the reason we keep repeating the cycle, because I always keep saying this, we keep putting the cart before the horse. And yes, you have to have change. But when I study Dr. King, one of the things that people miss in the story when they hear about Martin Luther King and what he did and all, they see the protest, right? They hear the speeches, but they miss the one-on-one relationship that he had with the president. It was the one-on-one relationship. The reason you protest, and just a quick educate, the reason you protest is to sit down at the table. That's the whole reason you protest, so that you can sit. And you know this because you were protesting. The idea is that, Mandela needed to sit down, right, with the officials of the day and go, and I love the Mandela, the movies and what we see from afar, right? And you were a part of those, right? But you saw the one-on-one relationship with Mandela and the leadership of the day going, what are we going to do? Yeah. That is where the change happens. And the reason we keep, I think, repeating these cycles is because we've got the protests, we've got the speeches, we've got the social media rhetoric, we've got the arguments and the fights. We don't have the one-on-one relationship, the uncommon foundation that we need in order to lead the change, because it is, especially now today, because things are so they're so a little bit covert in a sense. It's not overt. You have to have the one-on-one where we can sit down over Nando's. Come on, shout out, and start having a conversation about what's your life like, and your heart has to break for the person across the table. And what I found is that when people of power or people in positions of power, when their heart breaks for their Black and brown brother and sister, it breaks for the whole culture, and that leads to systemic change.
No, that is so helpful, and I do think that's really where the church can be most active, because on the ground. But it's you're so right. It's an uncommon gathering. They're not natural gatherings. It's not a natural thing that happens for most people. Yeah. And it looks as if it's contrived. Yeah. But I suppose you have to get through that barrier and say, well, I am going to meet, some people in the church, even if it's all set up between whites and blacks or brown people, it makes a difference. And then, of course, then it flourishes. Well, that is a very helpful. I'm not going to ask you about your elections. I'm not going to ask you about what's going on in your streets. And I'm not going to ask you what's going on in the stock market either. But the only thing to say is that it does matter. If America loses confidence in the gospel, it is not just a problem in America. It is a disaster for the rest of the world, and we look so much to many of the huge generosity of your countrymen, also your teaching and your helping, and these are difficult times and an unsettling time. And so I have to say that I think you're playing as what we would say a blinder, which is a good thing, to be doing what you're doing, to be speaking. Wow. Because just as we wrap up, a greater story, I feel I might be doing a small few things here and there, but you're encouraging us for a greater story. Give us the soundbite on a greater story.
Yeah, I think as we talk about finding the greater story in the midst of the civil unrest, I would say I'm more encouraged than I've ever been in my lifetime around the social progress in our world, specifically around race relations. And I'm more encouraged than I've ever been because we're finally starting to have the conversations that we've never had. We've been pushing it away for so long. It's unfortunate that the conversations have come on the heels of of so much unrest and some rioting and whatever it is you want to call it. But the exciting part is that we are now having the conversation. And it is out of the conversation that the greater story can be born. It's our tagline is that when your story connects to God's story, it leads to a greater story. And so as we look to connect our story to God's story in the midst of the pandemic, in the midst of the civil unrest, on the civil unrest side, it starts with conversation. In the midst of the pandemic, it starts with the idea of surrendering our will to God's will every single day and keeping that anchor that we talk about in the midst of the storm, knowing that as the storms are raging, the Messiah is in the boat with us. And if he's in the boat with us, he can calm the storm, or he can give us the ability to make it through. There is a greater story available for all of us if we let God come in and lead us.
Preach it, brother. Preach it. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful. Thank you, Sam. Thank you for all you're doing and such an encouraging message.
Ken, you the man. I love you, man.